The quiet hum of home. The rhythmic thwack-thwack-thwack of the butter churn resonated through the cool cellar, a steady counterpoint to the morning's quietude. Sarah's arms, toned by years of similar exertion, moved with unthinking grace. Her unassuming blue dress, a garment worn smooth by countless days, whispered with each descent of the plunger. The air, redolent with damp earth and fresh cream, felt as intrinsic to her as her own breathing. This was the serene pulse of home, a life orchestrated by the seasons and the Lord's divine plan. A pale golden light, slanting through the small cellar window, illuminated dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Sarah's gaze snagged on them for a fleeting moment, a brief respite from the insistent labor. Above, in the kitchen, Martha, her mother, would already be preparing the midday meal. Sarah knew Martha harbored anxieties, unspoken but evident in the subtle tightening around her eyes. The fraction of a second her hands would hesitate before resuming a task, worries about the hay, the impending winter, perhaps even about Sarah herself, though for what, Sarah couldn't quite discern. A satisfying resistance signaled the butter's formation, a noticeable shift in the churn's rhythm. Sarah offered a faint smile. Small triumphs these. Jacob, her father, would already be amidst the fields, the distant clop-clop of horses' hooves, a reassuring presence. He was a man of sparse words, his affection conveyed through meticulously mended fences, the careful stewardship of livestock, the unwavering provision for his family. Sarah revered his steadfast faith, though a part of her sometimes wished for a softer glance, a less guarded smile. Later that morning, butter churned, packed, and stored, Sarah joined Martha on the wagon journey to the market. The well-worn path meandered through verdant fields, past sturdy barns and neatly kept farmhouses. The buggy wheels crunched a consistent, comforting rhythm on the gravel. At the town's edge, the landscape of their world subtly shifted. Buggies still lined the designated hitching posts, but beyond them, a different life throbbed. "Mind your steps, child," Martha murmured, adjusting her bonnet's brim. Her outward composure veiled a faint wariness as they navigated the bustling thoroughfare. Sarah nodded, but her wide, keenly observant eyes absorbed every detail. The English world, sleek, brightly coloured automobiles glided past with a low rumble, utterly alien to the clip-clop of horse and buggy. Women in vibrant dresses moved with an effortless stride, their hair unbound and gleaming. The air thrummed with a distinct energy, a symphony of voices and unfamiliar music spilling from open doorways. She saw a young woman, no older than herself, laughing into a small, shining device pressed to her ear. What words could she be sharing? What sphere did she inhabit, where such joy could be expressed so freely, so publicly? Sarah felt a peculiar tug, a sensation she couldn't quite name. Not precisely longing, but a nascent curiosity, a soft unraveling of her tightly woven understanding. This other world had always been a known entity, a distant echo, but to witness it, to feel its palpable presence, opened a new dimension in her awareness. It was like finally seeing a painting she had only ever heard described. They sold their produce, the exchange of coins and pleasantries, a familiar ballet. Sarah kept her gaze mostly lowered, as was proper, yet her peripheral vision absorbed the flow, the ceaseless motion, the myriad expressions on faces so different from those in her community. She noticed a man whose attire, while similar to Jacob's work clothes, possessed a different cut, an ease to his posture. He conversed with a woman across a market stall, his smile open and unburdened. A fleeting thought, quick as a wren's wing, darted through Sarah's mind. What would it be like to share such an unreserved moment? Back home, as dusk draped the sky in rose and lavender, Sarah sat by her window, sewing. The house was hushed, save for the gentle ticking of the parlour clock. Jacob read his Bible. Martha hummed a hymn as she tidied the kitchen. The familiar tranquility of the evening settled around her, a balm after the market's sensory deluge. Yet, something within her had subtly shifted. The day's observations had left a faint, persistent reverberation. It wasn't discontent, nor a yearning to forsake her life or faith. It was subtler, a quiet stirring, like a seed beginning its slow push beneath the earth. A question, unnamed and unformed, began to unfurl itself in the quiet chambers of her heart. She pondered the butter churn, the steady rhythm of her existence, and then the vibrant, laughing woman. What did it signify, this gentle hum within her, distinct from the quiet hum of home? It was a tune she hadn't encountered before, and she wondered, with a shiver that encompassed both apprehension and exhilaration, what melody it might eventually become. A kind smile at the market. The crisp morning air at the market did little to settle the unusual flutter in Sarah's chest. Sunlight warmed the vibrant patterns of the quilts draped over her family's stall, each stitch a testament to hours spent in quiet devotion. Normally, the scent of fresh bread and the cheerful clamour of commerce would be a soothing balm, a familiar rhythm to her day. Today, however, a subtle restlessness gnawed at her, a faint echo of the previous market visit's unnamed question. Her hands, usually so steady, smoothed a corner of a particularly intricate double wedding ring quilt, her mind adrift from the task. She found herself observing the English shoppers with a new intensity, their easy laughter and unencumbered movements holding an unexpected fascination. A shadow fell over the stall. Sarah looked up, her gaze meeting a pair of warm, brown eyes. The man standing before her possessed a gentle smile that reached those eyes, crinkling at the corners. He was dressed simply, in clothing that spoke of comfort rather than fashion. Yet there was an air about him, a quiet confidence, a genuine curiosity. "These are truly beautiful," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. He gestured to a quilt depicting a sprawling garden, its colours a riot of blues and greens. "The detail is exquisite. You must have a remarkable talent." Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck. Praise, especially from an English stranger, was uncommon. "Thank you," she murmured, her gaze dropping briefly to her hands. "My mother and we work together." "Is this your work, then?" he asked, pointing to a small, almost hidden embroidered bee buzzing near the edge of the garden quilt. It was a personal touch, something she'd added during a moment of quiet reflection, a tiny rebellion against the uniformity expected of her. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Few ever noticed such a small detail. "It is," she admitted, surprised by his perceptiveness. "It reminds me of a summer I spent in Provence, in France," he mused, his smile broadening. Fields of lavender as far as the eye could see, and the air thick with the hum of 1,000 bees, all busy at their work. Just like this little fellow. France, Provence. The words were like exotic birds, soaring through her carefully constructed world. She pictured endless purple fields, a scent she couldn't imagine, and the relentless drone of insects. Her own bees, kept for honey, seemed suddenly provincial by comparison. "You have travelled far," she said, a hint of wonder in her voice. "I have been fortunate," he replied, his gaze still on the quilt. "My work takes me to many places. I'm David, by the way." He extended a hand. Sarah hesitated, then offered her own, her fingers brushing his briefly. His touch was firm, warm. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "It's a lovely name. So, you spend your days creating such beauty." "I also churn butter," she said, a small wry smile touching her lips, "and tend to the garden. There is much work on the farm." David chuckled. a warm, genuine sound. I imagine there is. But there must be a quiet satisfaction in it, isn't there? In seeing the fruits of your labour, whether it's a finished quilt or a perfect row of vegetables. There is, Sarah agreed, a rare openness in her tone. It is good work. It sounds like it, David said, his eyes meeting hers again. There was no judgment in his gaze, only an honest interest. I've always admired the way your community lives, so connected to the earth, to each other. It's a stark contrast to the rush of most modern lives. He paused, then continued. But I confess sometimes I wonder what stories lie behind the quiet faces I see. What dreams you might have, beyond the daily tasks. His words struck a chord, vibrating within the nascent curiosity that had begun to stir in Sarah. Dreams beyond the daily tasks. It was a question she hadn't dared to fully articulate even to herself. She thought of the laughing woman from the previous market day, the shining device, the uninhibited joy. Sometimes, Sarah began, her voice softer now, almost a whisper, sometimes I wonder about the world beyond our fields. David's smile softened further. It's a big world, Sarah. Full of wonders and challenges, and so many different ways of seeing things. I could tell you about the bustling markets of Morocco, where spices scent the air like a dream, or the quiet majesty of the Swiss Alps, where the air is so clear you feel you could touch the stars. He spoke with an easy cadence, painting vivid pictures with his words. Sarah found herself leaning forward slightly, captivated. The market sounds faded, replaced by the imaginary sense of Morocco and the crisp air of the Alps. His descriptions weren't boastful, but imbued with a genuine desire to share, to connect. It was a kindness, a gentle offering of knowledge, unlike anything she had ever experienced. A warmth spread through her, a comforting sensation that settled deep in her chest, chasing away some of the morning's restlessness. This encounter, this kind smile and these shared tales, felt like a door creaking open, revealing a world she was only just beginning to imagine. Whispers of a new world. The scent of wood smoke and damp earth usually brought Sarah a profound sense of peace. Now, it felt like a cage, its familiar comfort constricting rather than embracing. The field stretched out, a patchwork quilt of greens and browns, each furrow and fence line a boundary she'd never questioned. But David's words had planted a seed of discord, a whisper of a wider world that hummed beneath the placid surface of her days. She found herself making excuses to be near the town's edge. A forgotten spool of thread at the dry goods store, a need for a specific herb from the apothecary. Trivial errands that suddenly seemed vital. Her mother, usually so attuned to Sarah's rhythms, noticed only a new briskness in her daughter's step, a focused energy she attributed to the upcoming harvest. Sarah, however, knew the truth. She was searching for a particular shade of blue in a stranger's eyes, a smile that crinkled at the corners. The third afternoon, as the sun dipped towards the western hills, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple, she spotted him. He was seated on a low stone wall near the old oak, sketching in a small notebook, his dark hair catching the golden light. Her heart gave a curious lurch, a sensation like a butterfly taking flight within her ribs. She hesitated, her hand clutching the basket of dried lavender she'd just collected. Should she approach? Would he remember her? As if sensing her presence, David looked up. A slow, warm smile spread across his face, and he closed his notebook. "Sarah, I hoped I might see you again." His voice was as gentle as she remembered, a soft melody against the rustle of leaves. I was just getting some lavender," she stammered, feeling a blush creep up her neck. He patted the spot beside him on the wall. "Please, sit. The light is beautiful this time of day." She sat, her movements a little stiff, acutely aware of the space between them. Do you always sketch?" He nodded, turning the notebook to show her a quick, impressionistic drawing of the oak tree. "It helps me see, to truly observe the world around me." "What did you think of the Himalayas?" he asked, his gaze direct and kind. Sarah felt a surge of warmth. He remembered. I thought of the mountains, how grand they must be, and the colours you described, like jewels." David leaned back, his eyes distant, as if reliving the memory. "The air is thin and crisp, the silence profound. You can hear your own heartbeat, and the stars, they burn with a ferocity you won't believe, like diamonds scattered on black velvet." He spoke of ancient temples carved into cliff faces, of bustling spice markets in Marrakesh, where the air vibrated with 1,000 different scents, of vast plains in Africa where wild creatures roamed freely. He described the laughter of children playing in distant villages, the solemn faces of monks in saffron robes, the shimmering heat of deserts. Each word was a brushstroke, painting a vibrant, intricate picture in Sarah's mind. She listened, utterly captivated, her lavender forgotten in her lap. He spoke not with boastfulness, but with a quiet reverence for the experiences he'd gathered. He asked about her life too, about the rhythm of her days, the patterns of her quilts, the stories woven into each stitch. He seemed genuinely interested, not just in her replies, but in the unspoken things, the glimmers of curiosity in her eyes. As the last sliver of sun vanished, casting long shadows across the fields, David rose. "I should let you get home, Sarah. It's getting late." She stood, feeling a strange reluctance. "Thank you for sharing your world." He smiled, a deep, knowing expression. "It's a big world, Sarah. Bigger than you can imagine. And it's full of wonders." Walking home under the deepening twilight, the familiar path felt different. The crickets chirped their usual chorus, but now Sarah heard the imagined sounds of distant lands, a camel's plodding gait, the clang of a faraway bell. She pictured the Himalayas, not as a vague concept, but as a place of crisp air and burning stars. David's words had not just opened a door, they had flung it wide, revealing an expanse she hadn't known existed. A new sense of wonder bloomed within her, fragile yet potent, a quiet revolution stirring beneath her plain bonnet. Her world, once so complete and defined, now felt like a single thread in a much grander tapestry. The smooth stone. The morning air, sharp and clean, carried the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke as Sarah traversed the winding path to the old mill. Her heart, a restless tremor since her last encounter with David, quickened its pace with each step. She rationalized her journey as mere curiosity for his next tale, yet an undeniable, deeper current pulled her onward. He was there, as promised, sketching by the water's edge, his back to her. Sunlight caught the silver strands woven through his dark hair, a subtle gleam. A nascent warmth unfurled in Sarah's chest, a feeling both new and disquieting. She gave a soft, throat-clearing cough. David looked up, a smile deepening the crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "Sarah! Good morning. I'd hoped you would come." His voice, a low current, washed over her, instantly quieting the nervous flutter in her stomach. He always addressed her as if her presence were a cherished gift, a stark departure from the prosaic greetings of her own community. There, she was simply Sarah, Elias's daughter, Jacob's sister. Here, with David, she felt recognized. "Good morning, David," she replied, her voice softer than she'd intended. Her gaze drifted to his hands as he carefully placed his sketchbook and charcoals aside. They appeared strong, yet nimble, capable of both rendering the world on paper and, she mused, navigating distant seas. He rose, brushing dust from his trousers. I was just finishing this. He gestured to the half-completed sketch of the mill wheel, its moss-covered blades suspended in time. But I have something for you. Sarah's eyebrows lifted in surprise. A gift. No one had ever given her a personal gift before, nothing chosen solely for her. Her family exchanged practical items, necessities for daily life, but nothing simply bestowed. David reached into the pocket of his worn canvas jacket and withdrew a small, dark object. As he extended his hand, Sarah saw it was a stone, perfectly smooth and polished, the colour of wet river rock, fitting neatly into the cup of his palm. "This," he began, his gaze softening as he met hers, "I found on a beach far away, where the ocean whispers against the land. It's travelled with me for years, a small comfort in my pocket, a reminder of the world's vastness and how even the smallest things can hold such beauty." He paused, his thumb gently stroking its surface. "I want you to have it." He placed the stone directly into her open palm. Its coolness against her skin was immediate, followed by the faint warmth of his fingers as they brushed hers. A shiver, not of cold, but of something altogether different, traced its way down her arm. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, her voice barely audible. She turned the stone over, marvelling at its flawless surface, the way it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its weight in her hand felt significant, like a miniature world. "It brings me peace," David said, his eyes holding hers. "And I thought, perhaps it might bring you a moment of peace too, a quiet thought of possibility." Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck, warming her cheeks. Her chest fluttered, a rapid, insistent beat she recognized as her heart. He saw her. He understood. He wasn't just spinning tales. He was sharing a part of himself, a piece of his journey, offering her a tangible link to the world beyond her fences. The stone wasn't just a rock. It was a promise, a secret held between them. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching his. His expression was gentle, understanding, devoid of any expectation. He simply offered. And in that offering, Sarah felt a connection deeper than any conversation, more profound than any story. It was a silent acknowledgement of her burgeoning longing, a gentle nudge towards a world she was only just beginning to imagine. The smooth stone, nestled in her hand, felt like the beginning of everything. Hidden paths. The smooth stone, cool against her palm, became a secret companion in Sarah's apron pocket. Its presence, a tangible whisper of David and the world he represented, was a constant counterpoint to the familiar rhythms of her days. She churned butter with a new, almost frantic energy. She kneaded dough, her mind replaying the soft cadence of his voice. The thought of seeing him again, of hearing more stories, settled into her chest like a quiet, persistent hum. She found him at the mill 2 days later, just as the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in hues of apricot and rose. He was sketching again, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sight of him, so absorbed, sent a curious flutter through her. "Sarah," he said, looking up, a smile spreading across his face. It was a genuine, open smile that reached his eyes, crinkling their corners. "I wondered if you'd come. I found myself with a moment," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a sensation she hadn't experienced since childhood. He closed his sketchpad. "I was thinking," he began, his gaze thoughtful. "It might be easier to talk, to share, away from the noise here. There's a path, just beyond the old oak, that leads into the woods, a small clearing, hidden. No one goes there. A discreet meeting place. The words hung in the air, weighted with a new, unspoken understanding, a hidden path for hidden conversations. The idea, though unsettling in its secrecy, also held a strange allure. It felt like a small rebellion, a whispered defiance against the strictures of her life. "Tomorrow?" she asked, a boldness she didn't know she possessed rising within her. "After the noon meal?" He nodded, his smile widening. "I'll be there." The next day, Sarah felt a nervous tremor in her hands as she washed the lunch dishes. Her heart thrummed a strange, erratic beat. After ensuring her family was settled, she slipped out, ostensibly to gather herbs. The path, barely visible beneath a canopy of ancient trees, felt like a gateway. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, casting shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. David was already there, leaning against the gnarled trunk of an ancient maple. He wore a simple linen shirt, its sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He wasn't sketching today. He simply watched her approach, a quiet warmth in his eyes. Their initial meetings in the woods were tentative, a dance of unspoken curiosity and burgeoning trust. They spoke of small things, the weather, the changing seasons, the habits of the forest creatures. He pointed out different bird calls, identifying them with an ease that surprised her. She, in turn, described the growth of the corn, the patterns of the quilting bees. One afternoon, a week or so into their clandestine encounters, David reached into a canvas bag he carried. "I brought something," he said, pulling out a small, neatly wrapped parcel. "Lunch." Sarah's eyes widened. She'd never eaten a meal with anyone outside her family, let alone a man who was not of her community. She felt a blush creep up her cheeks. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing 2 thick slices of rye bread, a wedge of pungent cheese, and a handful of plump red berries. "It's simple but good," he offered, his voice gentle, sensing her hesitation. He broke off a piece of bread and offered it to her. Hesitantly, Sarah took it. The rye was denser than her own wheat bread, with a subtle, earthy flavour. Then he offered her a berry. Its sweetness burst on her tongue, an explosion of flavour utterly new. The cheese, sharp and tangy, was unlike anything she had ever tasted. Each bite was a discovery. As they ate, sharing the quiet intimacy of the meal, David spoke of his travels. He described the bustling markets of towns far away, the vastness of the ocean, the towering cathedrals of England. He spoke of people with different customs, different ways of living, their lives as varied as the leaves on the trees above them. Sarah listened, rapt, her world, once so clearly defined by the fences of her farm and the rules of her faith, began to stretch and unfurl. The hidden path in the woods, the shared food, the quiet stories, each element was a thread, weaving a new tapestry of understanding within her. She felt seen by David, truly seen in a way she never had before. And in that feeling, a seed of something new, something unsettlingly wonderful, began to take root. A different kind of kindness, the clearing became her secret sanctuary, a vibrant tapestry of wildflowers beneath a sun-dappled canopy. Here, the world outside dissolved, leaving only the quiet murmur of David's voice and the gentle rustle of leaves. Each encounter felt like uncovering a hidden trove, not just for the exotic flavors he offered, honey-sticky dates, spiced nuts that danced on her tongue, but in the deliberate grace with which he presented them. His movements possessed a quiet certainty, his gaze a tenderness she'd never encountered. One late summer afternoon, as the sun dappled through the branches, David extended a small, perfectly ripe plum, its skin a deep, bruised purple. His work-hardened fingers, surprisingly nimble, brushed hers as he passed it. A fleeting electric spark shot through her, settling deep in her stomach. He didn't withdraw his hand immediately, allowing their skin to linger in a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes. A small, knowing upturn of his lips bloomed warmth in her chest. "Be careful, the juice runs," he murmured, his voice a low, melodic hum that seemed to resonate with the forest's hush. Sarah bit into the plum, its tart sweetness exploding, yet it was the memory of his touch, the soft cadence of his words, that truly consumed her. In her community, expressions of affection were muted, practical. A shared burden, a steadying hand on uneven ground, a meal for a sick neighbour. These constituted their language of devotion. Fathers spoke with quiet authority, mothers with gentle guidance, but overt physical tenderness, lingering touches, or soft, unnecessary words were rarities, almost unheard of. She had always interpreted this as strength, a necessary reserve, maintaining their orderly and pure world. But David was different. He listened with an intensity that made every word she spoke feel important. His eyes, the colour of moss after rain, held hers with an unwavering steadiness that felt like a promise. He would often nod slowly as she recounted her days, the rhythms of farm life, the simple joys of a good harvest, the quiet frustrations of communal living. And when he spoke, his voice remained low, often infused with a curiosity that transformed her into a storyteller, not merely a farmer's daughter. She thought of Jacob, the young man her parents quietly hoped she would marry. Jacob was good, strong, dependable. He assisted her father with the heaviest chores, his shoulders broad and capable. When he spoke to her, it was with a respectful distance, his gaze usually fixed somewhere beyond her. His kindness manifested in his reliability, in ensuring fences were mended and fields ploughed true. But she couldn't recall a single instance of him simply looking at her, truly seeing her, the way David did. Nor could she recall him touching her hand, not even accidentally, and letting the contact linger. Lying in bed that night, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth clinging to her clothes, Sarah replayed the day. David's kindness was a foreign tongue, yet one she was rapidly acquiring. It wasn't boisterous or demanding. It was woven into the very fabric of his presence, in the way he held the clearing as their shared space, in the tales he spun of faraway lands that expanded her mind like an endless sky. Is this what kindness feels like outside? She wondered, gazing up at the dark rafters. Is this what connection feels like? The thought was unsettling, a tiny tremor beneath the solid foundations of her upbringing. She had always believed the love within her community was the purest form, forged by hardship and refined by faith. It was a love that required no grand gestures or soft words. It simply was, a sturdy, unyielding presence. Yet David's gentle nature, his open curiosity, the warmth in his gaze, seemed to tap into something deep within her. A part she hadn't known was waiting to be discovered. It was a different kind of kindness, one that whispered of possibilities she had never dared to imagine, hinting at a world where emotions could be expressed as openly as the wildflowers in the clearing, vibrant and unafraid. And with each meeting, each shared plum and stolen glance, that whisper grew louder, a compelling siren song against the quiet hum of her accustomed life. The contrast was stark, unsettling, and undeniably alluring. She knew, with a growing certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that her understanding of love, of kindness, of her own place in the world, was irrevocably shifting. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in the unknown, but the desire to explore it, guided by this different kind of kindness, was becoming an undeniable force. The weight of secrecy. The earthy scent of damp soil and pine needles clung to Sarah, a lingering whisper of the twilight woods she'd just navigated. David's touch, a phantom warmth on her skin, ignited a lightness in her chest, a buoyant joy that quickened her steps towards the familiar lamplit glow of home. Yet, with each stride, a leaden apprehension settled in her stomach, curdling the exquisite happiness of moments before into a bitter draught of guilt. She slipped through the back door, the rhythmic clatter of pots from the kitchen a welcome distraction. Martha, her back to Sarah, stirred a pot of stew, the air thick with the aroma of simmering vegetables and a palpable, almost oppressive, silence. Sarah's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She busied herself with her shawl, her movements deliberately hushed, a fervent hope to pass unnoticed. But Martha's awareness was a sharp blade. "You're late," Martha stated, her voice devoid of accusation, yet carrying a familiar tremor of concern Sarah recognized, the same one that preceded a brewing storm or a dip in milk prices. "I was helping Mrs. Miller with her quilting," Sarah lied, the words tasting like ash. The fabrication, smooth and well-rehearsed, underscored the widening chasm between her outward life and her hidden desires. She kept her gaze fixed on the floorboards, carefully avoiding her mother's discerning eyes. Martha hummed, an enigmatic sound. "Jacob was here earlier. He was asking after you." A flush crept up Sarah's neck. Jacob's steady, dependable affection now felt like a suffocating shroud. "Was he?" she managed, feigning indifference, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a bowl to set the table. "He spoke about the Westfield, said it would be good to get the last of the corn in before the frost truly sets." Martha paused, turning from the stove, her gaze finally meeting Sarah's. Her eyes, usually so practical and direct, held a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps worry or a nascent suspicion. "He's a good man, Sarah. A steady hand." Sarah felt the full weight of her deceit then, pressing down on her shoulders. Martha's words, meant as gentle counsel, felt like inescapable bonds. She pictured David's quiet certainty, the way crinkles formed at the corners of his eyes when he truly listened. Jacob's kindness was a sturdy oak, reliable and strong. David's was a wild, blossoming vine, promising unknown fruits. "He is," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The lie became a physical presence, a wedge driven between her and her mother, between her and the life laid out before her. The joy from her afternoon with David had evaporated, replaced by a dull ache of remorse. She longed to confess, to unburden herself, yet the words remained trapped behind a wall of fear. What would Martha say? What would the community say? The thought was a cold knot in her stomach. Later, in the hushed solitude of her small room, Sarah knelt by her bed, the worn pages of her German Bible open beneath the dancing shadows cast by the oil lamp. She closed her eyes, the familiar words of the Lord's Prayer a murmur on her lips, but her mind was a tempest. "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." The words resonated with painful irony. How could she ask for forgiveness when she was actively engaging in deception? Her conscience pricked her, a sharp, insistent pain. She pictured David's face, the gentle curve of his smile, his eyes holding hers, open and unafraid. And then she pictured Jacob's earnest gaze, his calloused hands, so ready to build a life with her. She was torn, a vessel caught between two powerful currents, pulling her in opposing directions. One offered the comfort of a familiar shore, the other the thrilling, terrifying expanse of the open sea. Guilt, a heavy shroud, settled over her. She prayed for guidance, for strength, for clarity. But the answers remained elusive, swallowed by the silence of her room, leaving her only with the echoing weight of her secret. The warmth of David's touch, once a beacon, now felt like a brand, marking her as different, as wrong. And yet she couldn't bring herself to regret it entirely. The yearning for more, for something beyond her familiar world, had taken root, deep and tenacious. Bishop Levi's watchful eye. The path home was usually a ribbon of familiar comfort for Sarah, a worn trail through fields that whispered of generations. Tonight, however, it felt like a gauntlet. Her feet moved automatically, scuffing the dry earth, but her mind was still adrift in the quiet intensity of David's gaze, the lingering scent of pine and something indefinably wild that clung to him. He had spoken of stars and distant cities, of a freedom that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. A shiver, not of cold, but of a profound internal shift, traced its way down her spine. The weight of Martha's knowing glance still pressed against her, a phantom touch of guilt that soured the sweet memory of David's words. Each step carried her further from him, deeper into the familiar, suffocating embrace of her world and the lie she now carried like a stone in her pocket. As she rounded the bend, the silhouette of the communal barn loomed, a dark, reassuring shape against the deepening twilight. The air cooled, carrying the faint, earthy smell of damp hay and horse manure. She imagined Jacob, perhaps already there, tending to his chores, his steadfast presence a stark contrast to the thrilling uncertainty David offered. The thought was a dull ache, a reminder of the quiet, muted affection Jacob held for her, a love as predictable and unwavering as the sunrise. It wasn't enough. It wasn't what she craved, not after tasting the vibrant, unsettling hunger in David's eyes. Unbeknownst to Sarah, a pair of eyes, sharp and unwavering, had already fixed upon her. Bishop Levi sat in his buggy, drawn by a sturdy roan mare, on a seldom-used lane bordering the west pasture. He had been returning from an elder's sickbed, the solemnity of his visit still clinging to him like a shroud. His gaze, usually softened by the lines of age, was now as hard and unyielding as flint. He saw the way she walked, a slight spring in her step that seemed out of place for one returning from an afternoon spent working. He noted the subtle flush on her cheeks, not from exertion, but from something else, something hidden. He had seen that look before, though rarely in their community. It was the look of a soul stirred, a spirit touched by something outside the divine. Levi tightened his grip on the reins, the leather creaking faintly. His brow, furrowed with the weight of his convictions, deepened. The purity of their community was paramount, a sacred trust handed down through generations. He was its guardian, its shepherd. Any deviation, any straying lamb, threatened the very fabric of their existence, the sanctity of their traditions. He remembered the whispers, the vague rumors that had drifted through the community in recent weeks, tales of a stranger seen on the fringes, a man who did not belong. He had dismissed them, as he always did, as idle gossip, but seeing Sarah now, bathed in the fading light, an unsettling sense of unease coiled in his gut. He watched until she disappeared inside the barn, a flicker of movement swallowed by the shadows. His mind, usually a quiet repository of scripture and communal lore, churned. He had known Sarah since she was a babe, a quiet, dutiful girl, always respectful. Martha and Thomas had raised her well, instilling in her the values of their people. Yet there was a nascent vulnerability in her, a quiet introspection that sometimes bordered on yearning. He had observed it, subtly, over the years. It was a quality he found unsettling, for yearning could lead to questioning, and questioning to doubt. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. But for Bishop Levi, the beauty was lost. He saw only the encroaching darkness, the subtle creeping in of the world, a constant threat to their ordered lives. He had to be vigilant. He had to be firm. It was his duty, however painful, to ensure the flock remained untainted. He flicked the reins, urging the roan mare forward, the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves a stark counterpoint to the turmoil brewing within him. The image of Sarah's flushed face lingered, a small but disquieting stain on the canvas of his steadfast world. He would watch, he would observe, and if his suspicions proved true, he would act, for the good of the community. He always would, before the community. The meeting house air, thick with the scent of beeswax and damp earth, once a balm, now felt like a suffocating shroud. Sarah sat rigid on the unforgiving bench, her hands folded in a semblance of composure. Yet her fingers twitched, tracing the worn weave of her simple dress. Sunlight, strained through the plain glass windows, laid pale rectangles across the floorboards, illuminating a slow dance of dust motes. Around her, the hushed rustle of prayer books and an occasional cough seemed swallowed by a profound, charged silence, a stillness that pressed down, heavy with unseen accusations. Each peripheral glance felt like an intrusive probe, every whispered word a sting of judgment. When Martha, 2 rows ahead, subtly shifted, Sarah felt the sharp prick of her knowing gaze, a needle of guilt twisting in her gut. She avoided the steadfast presence of Jacob beside her, his quiet, muted devotion a stark counterpoint to the vibrant tempest David had unleashed within. The lie, a living thing, throbbed beneath her skin, threatening to erupt. Bishop Levi rose, his silhouette stark against the window. His voice, usually a comforting bass, now cut the air with the brittle edge of flint. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his gaze sweeping the congregation, "we gather this Sabbath not only for prayer and reflection, but for a cleansing." A tremor of unease rippled through the room. Sarah's breath hitched. A dreadful certainty settled upon her. The cleansing was for her. His eyes, unyielding as granite, fixed on hers, holding her captive. The unspoken accusation in their depths struck her like a physical blow. "The purity of our community," the bishop continued, his voice gaining an inexorable momentum, "is a sacred trust. It is built on obedience, on faith, and on the unblemished sanctity of our vows. When these vows are broken, when the seeds of worldliness are permitted to take root, the entire harvest is imperiled." He paused, letting his words sink into the thick apprehension. Sarah's heart thrashed against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She felt the communal gaze pivot, 100 pairs of eyes dissecting her every twitch, every tremor. "Sister Sarah Miller," Bishop Levi's voice boomed, cleaving the heavy air like a bell's clang. "Step forward." The command hung, a palpable weight. A wave of dizziness washed over Sarah. Her legs felt like lead, yet some unseen force propelled her onward. Each step echoed in the profound quiet, underscoring her isolation. Her gaze remained fixed on the worn rug, unable to meet the burning stares that bored into her back. The familiar aisle to the front, a path she had trod countless times for communion, for blessings, now felt like a journey to the executioner's block. She stood before the bishop, head bowed, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles gleamed white. The sudden scent of incense was cloying, suffocating. "Sarah!" Bishop Levi's voice was stern, stripped of all warmth. "Have you honored the covenant made before God and this community? Have you kept your heart pure, free from the temptations of the outside world?" The words were a direct assault. A tear escaped, tracing a hot path down her cheek. She sensed Jacob's bewildered gaze, Martha's knowing satisfaction. The ugly, raw truth clawed at her throat. She swallowed, her mouth dry as dust. I have erred, Bishop," she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with shame and heartbreak. I have met with an outsider." The confession, once a tightly held secret, now hung in the air, a tangible thing. A collective gasp rippled through the congregation, shattering the quiet with murmurs of shock and disapproval. And in these meetings, Bishop Levi pressed, his voice relentless, did you allow yourself to be swayed? Did you entertain thoughts and feelings that betray your commitment to Jacob, to your family, to your faith? The honesty, though agonizing, poured out of her. Yes, she choked out, her voice cracking. I felt a stirring, a longing for something different. I allowed myself to listen to his words, to accept his gifts. I betrayed my heart and my vows. Hot tears streamed down her face now, blurring the edges of the room. Shame was a physical weight, pressing her to the floor. She felt the community recoil, their judgment a palpable force. Her heart ached, not just for the loss of her standing, but for the beautiful, terrifying secret she had been forced to expose. A secret that had promised a world beyond her comprehension, now irrevocably shattered. The unbearable choice. A profound quiet, dense and smothering, settled over the congregation. Each face, a tableau of shock and judgment, swiveled towards Sarah. The air, usually fragrant with clean linen and hymns, now thrummed with a palpable tension. Jacob, his hand still poised near hers, stood frozen, a figure sculpted from bewilderment and pain. His gaze, once tenderly affectionate, now mirrored the community's collective condemnation. Bishop Levi's voice, a deep resonance that vibrated through the very pews, shattered the stillness. Sarah Miller, he intoned, his eyes, sharp as flint, drilling into her. You have confessed to consorting with an outsider, a man not of our faith, and to nurturing sentiments that betray your sacred vows to Jacob and to God. Your actions have brought contamination into our sanctuary, a blight upon the purity we strive to uphold. A communal gasp rippled through the assembly. Sarah felt a tremor run through her, not born of fear, but of a strange, defiant resilience. She met Bishop Levi's unyielding stare, her jaw set. The Lord, in his infinite mercy, offers a path to absolution. Bishop Levi continued, his voice swelling, echoing off the rafters. You are given a choice, Sarah Miller. Renounce this outsider. Atone for your transgressions before God and this community, and dedicate yourself wholly to Jacob and the tenets of our people. Seek forgiveness, and though the journey will be long and arduous, you may, in time, rediscover your place among us. His gaze swept over the congregation, every head bowed in solemn accord. Sarah felt the oppressive weight of their judgment, a physical force pressing down. She caught Martha's eye across the aisle. A knowing satisfaction lurked in the older woman's gaze, a subtle, almost imperceptible curl of her lip that spoke volumes. Martha had known, or at least suspected. The thought sent a cold shiver down Sarah's spine. Or, Bishop Levi's voice hardened, each word a stone plummeting into a deep well. If you refuse to turn from this path of sin, if you choose to cleave to the allure of the outside world, you will be cast out, excommunicated. You will be as a withered branch, severed from the vine, forever alienated from our community, from your family, from all that you have known. The starkness of his declaration hung in the air, chilling and conclusive. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. Excommunication. The word itself was a death knell, a spiritual banishment that presaged absolute solitude. No more Sunday gatherings, no more shared meals, no more familiar faces. Her mind reeled, a whirlwind of conflicting images. She saw David's face, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled, the way his hands had gently touched hers, a touch that spoke of understanding and acceptance. She remembered his stories, vibrant and full of a world she had only dreamed of. His laughter, free and unburdened, echoed in her memory. He had unveiled a world beyond the muted colours of her own, a place where emotions were expressed with a raw, beautiful honesty she had never known. Then, another image superimposed itself. Her mother's tear-streaked face, her father's stern, disappointed frown, her younger siblings, their innocent eyes wide with confusion, the scent of her grandmother's apple pie, the warmth of the hearth on a winter's night. Her entire life, intricately woven into the fabric of this community, was suddenly unraveling before her eyes. To forsake David, to deny the awakening he had stirred within her, felt like tearing out a part of her own soul. It meant retreating to a life of quiet resignation, a love that felt muted and polite compared to the tumultuous wonder David had ignited. It meant burying the burgeoning woman she was becoming, the one who yearned for more than the prescribed path. But to choose David, to choose the unknown, the terrifying liberation of the outside world, meant severing herself from every tie that bound her, every familiar comfort. It meant confronting a world that, without David's stories, felt vast and terrifying. It meant losing her family, her heritage, her very identity. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, a physical ache in her chest. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the shallow sound of her own breathing. Every eye was on her, waiting. Jacob, still by her side, finally looked up at her, his expression a plea. His unwavering devotion, even in the face of her betrayal, felt like another heavy burden. The choice was unbearable. Either way, she would be broken. Either way, a part of her would die. A parent's pain, the collective gasp of the community had faded, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed in on Sarah. Bishop Levi's words still echoed, the pronouncement of her potential excommunication a brand on the air. Her gaze, which had been fixed on the bishop's unyielding face, now drifted, seeking what? Absolution? Understanding? Her eyes first snagged on Martha, whose own gaze was a strange blend of sorrow and something akin to grim satisfaction. A silent, "I told you so," seemed to pass between them, a chilling confirmation of Martha's long-held suspicions about Sarah's wandering heart. The corners of Martha's mouth, usually turned down in perpetual disapproval, now settled into a tight, almost knowing line. Sarah felt a fresh wave of shame, not for her choices, but for the predictable nature of Martha's judgment. Then her eyes moved, drawn by an invisible thread, to her parents. They stood a little apart from the main cluster of onlookers, their faces a tableau of profound anguish. Her mother, usually so stoic, had her hands clasped tightly before her, knuckles white. Her father, his broad shoulders slumped, stared at the ground, unable to meet her gaze. The deep furrows etched into their foreheads seemed deeper, carved by the weight of this public spectacle, this wound inflicted on their family. They were caught, Sarah realized, between their love for her and their unwavering devotion to the community and its rigid laws. She saw the silent plea in their eyes, a shared flicker of desperation that pierced her more deeply than any accusation. It wasn't a spoken word, but a desperate yearning for her to choose the familiar path, to renounce, to repent. It was a plea for peace, for the return of normalcy, for the erasure of this agonizing rupture. Her mother's lips trembled, and her father's hand instinctively reached for his wife's, a gesture of shared sorrow. Their pain became her pain, a heavy cloak settling over her already burdened shoulders. The choice she was about to make would not just redefine her life, but irrevocably scar theirs. Jacob stood near them, a silent sentinel of bewildered hurt. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on some point beyond Sarah, beyond the gathered community. He looked like a man struck by lightning, his world abruptly and violently rearranged. The unwavering devotion that had always shone in his eyes was still there, but now it was laced with a raw, agonizing confusion. He loved her, she knew, with a simple, steadfast heart. And in that moment, seeing his brokenness, a different kind of ache blossomed in her chest, a guilt that had nothing to do with David and everything to do with the man she had promised her life to. The silence stretched, thick and unyielding. The air grew heavy, pregnant with the expectation of her answer. Sarah closed her eyes for a fleeting second. The image of David's face, his kind smile, his vibrant eyes, flashing behind her eyelids. A memory of his laughter, rich and free, echoed in her mind. And then she imagined the alternative, a life without David. The colours in her mind's eye leached away, leaving a stark, monochrome landscape. The laughter faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the farm, the familiar cadence of daily chores, the comfort of tradition. But now, that comfort felt like a cage, the traditions like chains. She imagined walking through her days, performing the expected duties, exchanging polite greetings, sitting beside Jacob at meals, sharing a bed with him. And every moment, every breath would be an empty echo. Her heart, once so full, so vibrant in David's presence, would be a hollow drum. The world would flatten, its edges dulled, its joys muted. The vibrant hues of hope and passion David had painted onto her existence would peel away, leaving behind a bleak and empty canvas. She saw herself, years from now, a shadow of the woman she could have been, her spirit withered, her dreams unfulfilled, her longing buried so deep it became a constant, dull ache beneath her ribs. She imagined the quiet resentment that would simmer, the unspoken regrets that would fester. She would exist, yes, but she would not truly live. The thought was a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. No, she couldn't. Not after tasting true life, not after knowing a different kind of love, a love that saw her, truly saw her, beyond the confines of her role. The pain of leaving, the fear of the unknown, the agony of disappointing her parents and breaking Jacob's heart. All of it was immense, but the pain of staying, of renouncing the burgeoning self David had awakened, of extinguishing the flame he had lit within her, felt immeasurably worse. She opened her eyes. The decision, a fragile, terrifying thing, solidifying within her. The weight of her parents' sorrow, the bewildered hurt in Jacob's eyes, the community's judgment, it all pressed down, but somehow it also forged a defiant resilience within her. She would not betray herself. Her gaze swept across the faces, landing finally on Bishop Levi, whose stern expression remained unchanged. The moment of truth had arrived. The hardest decision. The air in the meeting house hung thick and heavy, a palpable weight pressing down on Sarah. Her parents' anguished pleas still echoed in her ears, a mournful refrain against the rising tide of her own certainty. She saw the pain etched on their faces, the worry in her father's usually stoic eyes, the tremor in her mother's clasped hands. And Jacob. His face, a mask of bewilderment and hurt, ripped at a part of her she hadn't known was still tender. He stood, shoulders slumped, a boy lost in a man's frame, his world shattering around him. Martha watched, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of grim satisfaction playing on her lips, a silent declaration of, "I told you so." Bishop Levi remained impassive, his gaze unwavering, the granite of his conviction as solid as the stone foundation of the meeting house itself. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing, broken only by the frantic beat of Sarah's own heart against her ribs. She was standing at a precipice, the familiar world of her youth behind her. a terrifying, exhilarating unknown stretching before her. Her choice, once a tangled knot of confusion, had coalesced into a sharp, undeniable truth. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Sarah felt a strength she hadn't known she possessed flood her limbs. It wasn't the boisterous strength of defiance, but a quiet, resolute power, born of a profound inner shift. The muted palette of her life, once comforting, now felt like a shroud. David's world, vibrant and alive, pulsed with the promise of colour she had only ever dreamed of. To turn away from that now, to retract the tentative steps she'd taken towards a different kind of love, would be to extinguish a flame that had only just begun to burn within her. It would be a betrayal, not just of David, but of the woman she was slowly, tentatively becoming. Her gaze swept across the faces, each one a testament to the life she was contemplating leaving. She saw Sister Mary, her kind eyes clouded with sorrow. She saw young Thomas, wide-eyed and confused. And then she met Jacob's gaze again. The raw, open wound of his pain was almost unbearable. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, not of regret for her choice, but for the collateral damage it inflicted. I cannot renounce him. Sarah's voice, though soft, carried an unexpected clarity in the stillness. It wasn't a shout, not a defiant roar, but a statement of simple, unyielding truth. Each word, deliberate and firm, cut through the oppressive silence like a sharp knife. My heart, it has found a different path. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering, a visceral reaction to the unthinkable. Heads shook, whispers erupted, a low, buzzing hum that quickly escalated. Martha's grim satisfaction deepened, her lips pressing into a thinner line. Jacob's face crumpled, the bewilderment giving way to an agonizing blend of hurt and disbelief. He took a hesitant step forward, as if to plead, to demand an explanation, but his voice failed him. Bishop Levi's expression remained unchanged, though a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps disappointment, perhaps a resigned expectation, crossed his eyes. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, his towering figure casting a long shadow across the room. The murmurs died down, replaced by an expectant hush. Sarah stood her ground, her chin lifting almost imperceptibly. Her hands, clasped before her, no longer trembled. A strange sense of calm settled over her, a quiet acceptance of the storm she had just unleashed. The weight of disapproval, the crushing judgment, it was all there, tangible and heavy. But beneath it, a tiny, resilient spark had ignited, a nascent feeling of freedom. It wasn't triumph, not yet. It was simply the profound relief of having spoken her truth, of having chosen herself, however terrifying the consequences. The world outside the meeting house, a world of unknown landscapes and unimagined colours, beckoned, and for the first time, Sarah knew she would answer its call. Towards an unknown horizon. The air in the meeting house, thick with unspoken accusations and the lingering scent of damp wool, felt suddenly suffocating. Sarah stood, not moving, even as the collective gasp of the community vibrated through the wooden floorboards. She had spoken her truth, a truth that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The world had not ended. The sky had not fallen. Instead, a peculiar lightness bloomed in her chest, a sensation akin to shedding a heavy cloak after years of wear. She turned then, her movements deliberate, unhurried. Her eyes, no longer downcast, met the gazes of those who watched her, some with pity, others with undisguised condemnation, a few with a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, perhaps a hesitant curiosity. She saw her mother's tear-streaked face, her father's rigid posture, Jacob's raw, wounded expression. The pain she had inflicted was undeniable, a sharp ache in her own heart, yet it was overshadowed by the fierce, protective joy of her decision. With each step towards the double doors, the murmurs behind her grew louder, a buzzing hive of judgment. But their words, once capable of shattering her resolve, now seemed distant, muffled by the burgeoning roar of her own spirit. The familiar worn threshold of the meeting house felt different beneath her boots, no longer a boundary to her world, but a gateway. She pushed open the heavy door, the sound of protesting hinges a punctuation mark to her departure. The late afternoon sun, previously filtered and subdued, now burst upon her, a golden anointing. It warmed her skin, chased away the lingering chill of the meeting house, and seemed to illuminate the path before her. The dusty road stretched ahead, familiar yet utterly transformed. She walked, not looking back immediately, savouring the feeling of the earth beneath her feet, the wind on her face, sensations that felt new, vibrant, alive. She walked past the fields, now fallow, their rich soil awaiting the next season's planting. The rows of corn, once a comforting symbol of home and sustenance, now seemed to stand as silent witnesses to her rebellion. She saw the familiar barn, its red paint faded by years of sun and rain, a place where she had spent countless hours, where the scent of hay and livestock was etched into her memory. Each landmark, once a tether, now felt like a loosened knot. Finally, as the meeting house receded into the distance, a small, dark shape against the vast canvas of the sky, she paused. She turned, taking in the entire panorama of her former life, the clustered homes, the orderly fields, the thin wisp of smoke rising from a distant chimney. It was all there, a tableau of the life she had known, the life she had chosen to leave. A profound wave of nostalgia, sharp and bittersweet, washed over her. It was the landscape of her childhood, her traditions, her very identity. And now it was a memory. A single tear tracked a path down her cheek, tasting of salt and farewell. It was not a tear of regret, but of acknowledgement, for the loss, for the love she was leaving behind, for the quiet beauty of a world that would continue without her. She inhaled deeply, the crisp autumn air filling her lungs, carrying the scent of drying leaves and distant wood smoke. It was the smell of freedom, of the unknown. Then she faced forward again. The setting sun cast long shadows ahead of her, stretching towards the horizon. The road, once familiar, now seemed to beckon into an uncharted territory. Apprehension, a cold knot in her stomach, contended with a burgeoning excitement. What lay beyond the next rise? What did this different path truly entail? She thought of David, his kind eyes, the gentle strength of his hands, the way he listened to her, truly listened. His words, his stories, had painted a world she had only dreamed of, a world teeming with possibilities, with a different kind of love, a deeper understanding. He was the horizon she was walking towards, a beacon in the gathering twilight. The future was not a clear map, but a whispered promise. It was not a certainty, but a hope. And for Sarah, who had lived a life of unwavering certainty, that hope, however fragile, was enough. She took another step, then another, her stride growing steadier with each one. The path ahead was unknown, but she was no longer alone in her heart. She was walking towards David, towards herself, towards an unknown horizon, her spirit ablaze with a terrifying and exhilarating new beginning.